All right, the first reason that you should try a 30-minute painting is that it's going to help you understand what truly makes a painting work. Take, for example, this 30-minute Thailand landscape that I did. I knew that the key to making it work wasn't about getting every single little detail and crack in the rock. What was most important was dialing in the right value for the shadowed side and the light side of the rock. And you can see here, I actually had to make the light side of the rock a lot darker than what is in the photo. See, if I would have tried this a few years ago, I would have tried it on a 16 by 20 inch canvas and I would have worked it for hours and hours trying to get it to work, just to come to the realization that like, oh, I need to make the light side of this rock darker than what I think. You see how inefficient that is? Like you spend hours and hours just to learn something that you could have learned in 30 minutes. Now, the 30-minute paintings that you're gonna see in this video were actually done as tutorials for my Patreon. They were a lot of fun and I plan on doing a lot more of these. If you wanna sign up, the link to my Patreon is in the description of this video. And I did these all on little 6 by 8 inch panels, which actually brings me to my next reason, which is it's going to help save you money. It's gonna help save you money mainly on materials. Improvement requires repetition. And so you want to be able to practice for as cheap as possible. And you can actually get a 3-pack of these little 6 by 8 inch linen panels for $9, opposed to if you got a 16 by 20 inch panel, which is like $46 for 3 of them. And this is for linen too. Linen's good to paint on. You're also going to use less paint to practice, which will save you money. You could probably save even more money if you got a pad of canvas paper and then just taped off small 6 by 8 inch dimensions. It's also going to save you money because you're going to be able to test out ideas for bigger paintings. That way you're like not wasting a big canvas on a painting that was pretty much doomed right from the start because you didn't figure it out. All right, the third reason you should try 30-minute paintings is that it's going to help you paint loose. I get this question a lot. People say, how do you paint loose? How do you paint loose? Well, if you're forced to paint small and fast, you're naturally going to paint looser. But don't get loose confused with sloppy or inaccurate. It's actually the opposite. When you paint loose, you have to be accurate in everything else. I mean, you have to be accurate in your drawing. You have to be accurate in your values and in your colors and your composition. Think of it as trying to write a story that's normally 200 pages and get the same information across and the same experience in 50 pages. You'd have to be a lot more deliberate and more specific with your words. And a good thing to help you paint loose is working big to small, starting with the big shapes and working to the small shapes. That's what I did with this teapot. I got the big shapes in first, and then I started stacking smaller shapes on top. Same thing with the lemon here. I first blocked it out just light and shadow, those 2 big shapes. And then I worked the transition between light and shadow, and then the reflected light underneath, and then the lightest areas in the light. All right, the fourth reason is that it will cause you to paint more. Knowing that the painting's only gonna take you 30 minutes, it's gonna be a lot easier for you to make the commitment to sit down and paint. It's not gonna seem as daunting. Also, if a painting doesn't go well, it's not demoralizing because you didn't spend a whole lot of money on some big canvas with a lot of expectations attached to it. And since you're doing more paintings, you're actually going to improve faster, and that improvement is going to get you more excited and want to paint even more. All right, reason number 5 is that it's going to teach you how to use the correct amount of paint in your painting. I get a lot of people that ask me about like, oh, like how thick should my paint be? Oh, I can't get my paint to do this. Or when I try to work back into the paint, it takes it off the canvas. Well, even in a small, quick 30-minute painting, you can get practice with how thick to make the paint and like how much pressure to put with your brush. For example, with this painting of Venice, Italy, I blocked out the shadowed side of these buildings with dark, relatively thin paint, not transparent, but not super thick. And then when it came time to identify lighter shapes within the shadows of these buildings, I used lighter paint, but it was still a little thin, and I just lightly brushed it in to that dark paint and kind of let it mix in. That way it didn't get too bright. It still stayed as looking in the shadows, which was completely different than when I painted the building in light. And I really wanted to create that effect of being hit with that direct sunlight from the evening. So I used a lot thicker paint that I kind of laid on opposed to brushing in. All right, reason number 6 is that it's great for exercises. For this 30-minute painting here, not only did I have the reference of the apple and lemon, but I also had right next to it a reference of the plain shaped fruit that I made out of clay. Now, quick side note, I get a lot of people asking me like where I got these plain fruit. I actually made them out of air dry clay. If you would like me to make a video on how I made these, please comment below. If I get enough people asking for it, I'll make one. Now, the thing with exercises is that most of the time with an exercise is you're trying to just focus on one aspect of painting that you're trying to get better at. And once you've practiced that, it's time to move on. So you wouldn't want to try and do like an exercise on some big painting that's going to take you a lot of time, and you have to like keep going and refining and refining. Once you've practiced what you wanted to practice, it's time to move on and do another painting. All right, number 7, it's going to save you a lot of time learning. I always say that the fastest way to get better is to go through the entire painting process from beginning to end as many times as possible, meaning you're going to do a lot better doing a lot of quick, small paintings opposed to spending a lot of time on one big painting. There's actually a study done about this. I forget the details, but they had one group of students spend an entire month making one pot. It was like a pottery class or something. And then they had another group make a pot every single day. And by the end, the group that had made a pot every single day were actually better at making pots, and their final pot was a lot better than the group that had been spending the entire time just on one pot. Feel like the same goes for painting. And kind of what I was talking about before in terms of learning what makes a painting work, you're going to learn that a lot quicker. All right, number 8 is that it's going to help you with your simplification skills. With these paintings, there's no room or time for detail. With this Venice painting, it's not about putting in every single window that I see in the buildings. It's more about squinting my eyes and seeing the big shapes and the big values and getting those in correctly. With this beach scene, it's not about painting every single branch and leaf that I see in the trees. It's about first communicating these trees in the distance and sitting them in the distance by using the right color and value, and then these trees in the foreground to adjust that color and value to make them sit in the foreground. All right, number 9, it's going to help you a lot with composition. Composition is about the big picture and the big elements of a scene. For example, with this beach scene, there's a lot going on. There's these branches in the water, there's all these waves in the ocean, the white water on the sand. But I know that is not what is affecting composition. What is affecting composition are the big value shapes, and being able to see and quickly understand what elements of the scene are a midtone, what are darks, and what are lights. For example, my focal point is this person in white standing in front of these dark trees because it's the only area in my painting where the lightest light and darkest dark touch. Also, the lines created from the waves on the surf are pointing to that focal point. A lot of times I see students doing a small painting and they're struggling to get like little details, and they feel like they can't make certain things work because they can't paint small enough. If you're having trouble painting a part of the scene because it's so small, that should indicate to you that that part of the scene is not important, and it's so small that it's not really playing a part in the big picture of the composition. Like with this painting, like I know the composition works just from putting in this 3-toned underpainting of big shapes. And what happens a lot of times is students lose sight of those big shapes. They get stuck in the details, in these small shapes, these small effects that are happening. But when a painting is that small and you're working that fast, you don't really have time to get into that. And just like the actual physical perspective of being able to see the whole canvas very easily because it's so small is going to help you see the big picture of the composition and not get caught up in the things that don't matter. All right, number 10, it's going to help you solve problems in your paintings. A lot of times you don't know what problems a painting is going to present you until you actually start painting it. So it's better to solve those problems in a small, quick painting than a big, slow painting. Painting will let you know very quickly what problems it's going to throw at you. And a lot of times you have to test things out. For example, with this Venice painting, I knew I was going to have to probably darken the sky to make it darker than the value of the building in the light. Because I really wanted that building to pop in the sunlight. And the only way I was going to be able to do that is if I made the sky darker. But I didn't know how dark I needed to make that sky. So I had to paint it and test it out and see how far I needed to push it. It's a lot easier to do in a small 6x8 painting that's only 30 minutes than trying to figure that out on the final painting that's like 16x20. It's just going to take like a lot more paint to constantly try and darken the sky, because you can't always trust the colors and values in a photo. I've talked a lot about that in previous videos, especially with landscapes. And so you're going to have to make things up certain times or call on your knowledge you have from actual painting from life. So just being able to test things out, test out ideas in a small, quick painting is going to be extremely helpful. All right, again, if you want to see any of these full 30-minute painting tutorials, they are on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description below. I'm Chris Fornatero here telling you to go get painting.